Good evening, everyone. We want to thank you for coming tonight. We're going to begin our meeting. I'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, July 6th at 5:00 p.m. in the Commissioner Chambers regarding a presentation regarding the Administrator's budget. Roll call. Mugia, Johnson.
Here.
Kane. Here. Markley. Here. Walters. Here. Philbrook.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right, we begin the budget season, and as you know, the last 4 years we have done the budget much differently. We have begun the process at our strategic plan in the fall, had a public hearing early in the winter so the public could actually give input that could be vetted into our budget. We have a spring financial retreat with the Commission to evaluate priorities, financial priorities, and then we work our capital outlay throughout the year, and we really work this budget process throughout the year. So tonight we're going to see the formal presentation of the document that we've been working on really for 10 months. And so I want to recognize Mr. Bach and his team have done an outstanding job putting this together, and we're looking forward to the presentation. Mr. Bach?
Thank you, Mayor, Commission, citizens. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and present the 2017 amended and 2018 proposed budget. This year's presentation is one where really gives us an opportunity to take a look at where we are and where we've been. As this is the 20th year of consolidation of the unified government, tried to make some notations to that point and some reflection in time to where we were 20 years ago as we look at this budget. I also worked to maintain the momentum that I think we started last year when we really put in place the STAR bonds that are coming forward and how we were using that money to work toward tax reduction and also go toward blight reduction and other initiatives that we could move forward in our community. And with that, we have a focus on the Commission goals, and that's really what I highlight up here on the first is where we take a look at the vision of that you all put together to really work toward a vibrant intersection of diversity, opportunity, and distinctive neighborhoods and have an engaged community with healthy, fulfilled, and inspired. So as we move from that point, I look at what's happened for 20 years since we did consolidation. And I think it's one thing I have to say right off the bat is visionary elected leadership. And that starts from the beginning when we started consolidation. Then we had elected leadership that stepped forward and said, what are we going to do to look forward and make our community better? And that's the initiatives that this governing body has continued to do through today to say, what are we going to do in the next years? This is what we've done, but what can we continue to do to make our community better? Since consolidation, before that time, we've reduced our collective mill rate for the unified government by 19%. We've added 24,000 jobs to our community, and there are ebbs and flows in jobs where things go down, but we've seen 24,000 new ones come into our community. For the 4 decades before consolidation, we saw a population decline in Wyandotte County. Since that time, we've seen a 7.2% population increase. We're the #1 tourism destination in the state of Kansas. When you walk around the community today, you see people wearing a t-shirt that says Original Dot. And I can tell you in 1995 and 96, you didn't see that. The perception of our community is better, not only by our own residents, by the people around the metropolitan area. We've had a significant reduction in crime. In fact, during this 20 years, a couple of years ago, we hit a 40-year low in where the crime rate has been in Kansas City, Kansas. Innovation, transparency have been really key marks within this consolidation group. Before 1997, when they came in, set the legislation in place, a couple of landmark things were done for our community. We put forth an ethics administrator, ethics commission, and also a legislative auditor who would stand forth and check things out, review actions of our government. Today, where we're at, you have pushed us to go forward and continue to be transparent in what we do of posting everything we do online. We did unified OpenGov a couple of years ago, and now we have our next request system, any system that just came, anybody that wants to request something from the government, they post the question out there. We list it, it stays posted and live for any other citizen to continue to see. Continuing transparency, where we've been. And not to mention the last point on here, we've had just about $5 billion in new economic development during this 20-year time period. Noting a few of the big commercial retail developments, the Village West development that's come in place, several plazas been built, 39th Street corridor, but notable on here are 6 new grocery stores. Another thing that had been decades since we had seen a new grocery store come into our community. During this 20-year time span, we've had 6 new ones as we continue to work for more in our community. Also, with that, we have our bread and butter for our community, which has been the manufacturing and retail. It's a list that can go on for pages. Don't have that many put in, but from General Motors expansion, new Amazon dairy farmers, what we saw with Lady Baltimore building, many more that have just continued to build in our community to get to that $4.8 billion of investment. All right, moving from this point, put together the Commission's strategic plan. Well, how did we get here? And as the Mayor said, as you worked on this budget year-round, this governing body has taken a lot of input and worked on a lot of things to get to the point where we are to build this strategic plan and the goals that we have. Had a 2016 citizen survey to get input from our residents to what we were going to do. Mayor had a listening tour, walked around. A lot of the focus of that was about where we're going with star bonds, but it also provided good input about what is the important thing going on in our community. We've done professional studies in our law enforcement areas from the fire department, detention center, also law enforcement for what's going on in field patrols. We've just done one for parks and continuing to look at various areas that play into this, and also commission treats that ultimately have weighed into building these commission goals, which the 6 points are set out here, and they are reducing blight, increasing safety and the perception of safety in our community, increasing community health, increasing economic prosperity for all of our citizens, improving customer service and communication, and increasing community cohesion. These goals are woven into the budget that you're going to see in this evening as far as what are the big initiatives. However, I also note the key objectives I put into this budget are being financially balanced, aligned with the strategic plan that I just mentioned to you. It will reduce the city property tax rate by almost 5%, and it maintains the county mill rate at that constant, and that's while we move forward with a new juvenile center, which as you look at many other communities, and really has been in the norm in this community, when you look on the county side, when you add a major building or infrastructure, that's something that takes a special bond levy that's done out there, and there's a whole voter. We're able to do this within our existing property tax rate that we have today. All right, so taking a look at the numbers and what we have in this year's budget, I'm going to turn this over to our Chief Financial Officer, Kathleen Von Atchen, and she's going to walk through this with us.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to thank my staff, the Budget Office, Reginald Lindsay and all of his staff, as well as Debbie Johnsher, and my Deputy CFO, and Mike Grimm, and a bunch of others for putting this budget together. Thank you for your interest. We want to talk first about how the pie chart looks of the entire UG budget. It totals $358 million, and here you have the total pie chart broke up into the various different fund types. So 62% of all of the $358 million is considered the general fund. And there are 3 funds that make up the general fund in our unified government. That's the city, the county, and the consolidated parks fund. So the city general fund totals $154 million, and it's 43% of the budget. Consolidated parks totals $6.5 million, and it is 2%. County general fund is 17% of the budget at $59 million. The remaining areas are special revenue funds comprising of 11%, or $37.5 million. Proprietary or enterprise funds totals 17% of the total budget at $62 million. And then the remaining fiduciary and debt service funds at $37 million. I'll be talking more specifically about these funds these fund types as we look at the next graphs. This first one is the City General Fund. The City General Fund is where most of our operational costs are recorded, and it totals $154 million. Public safety comprises 55% of the entire general fund, and this $84 million in public safety goes for police and fire. The Public Works Department gets 12% of the total city general fund at $18.8 million. That pays for engineering, street maintenance, traffic, building maintenance, and fleet, parking control, many other things. Administration is $12 million at 8% of the total, and that includes naturally the county administrator and the mayor and commissioner's office, but it also includes the chief legal counsel, budget and finance, the Department of Technology, human resources, procurement, and media relations. So over on the bond and interest, that's 7% of the total, and what that $11 million is paying for is one debt service on the parking stadium parking bonds that we issued in 2010, plus a $10.2 million debt reserve that is required by our bond documents and our bond counsel. The last larger area is community services at $20 million, or 13% of the total budget. That includes planning, transit, economic development, and the Neighborhood Resource Center and code enforcement. Moving on to the county general fund, which totals $59 million. We have, again, 55% of which is dedicated for public safety. That totals $32 million and includes the sheriff, the jail, juvenile detention facility, the emergency management, and our county dispatch. Public Works comprises of 6% and includes fleet maintenance and building maintenance. Administration on the county side is 20% of the total fund, and that includes court administration, finance, motor vehicle registration, property tax administration, legislative auditor, GIS, the 311 call center, delinquent tax, and the appraiser. So quite a few areas in there. Community services is 4%, totaling $2.5 million, and that includes the county coroner, the register of deeds, the historical museum, and the economic development. And then over here, the judicial services is 12% of the total county budget at $7.3 million, and that includes the district court, district attorneys, court administrator, and the domestic court services. So a great deal, a number of services provided from the general fund departments. This slide basically illustrates the remaining areas of our unified government budget, and the first one are these other governmental services, which totals $82 million. The largest area is the bond and interest fund at 46%, and that basically includes the annual debt service on our roughly $330 million in outstanding general obligation bonds, and our county or public building commission debt of $17 million. The community services at $23 million includes elections, the transit, aging, health department, and community development or housing. Public Works over here on totals $14 million or $11.6 million, and that includes dedicated sales tax and the various special street and highway fund. Over on the enterprise funds, we have 7 enterprise funds, and the largest one is the sewer fund, comprising of $70 million of the total $62 million. That's followed by the stormwater fund, which totals 7%. And then we also have the emergency medical services fund, and the Sunflower Hills Golf Course and the stadium for T-Bones Fund. So in looking at all the $358 million that we, as the unified government, collects and deposits and utilizes for our various services, of course, the largest part is the general fund. And there are 4 revenue sources that comprise 83% of the consolidated general fund. And that is the property tax, sales tax revenue, franchise taxes, and charges for services. Over the last 10 years, these revenue sources, some have remained fairly flat, while others have increased. So of the $73 million you see up here, in 2014, the total increased by 8.4 million, no, 2017. All of these revenues increased by 8.4%, and in 2018, they increased by 1.4%. The 2017 increase is due to the additional star bond revenues, which total in the general fund $9.4 million. So many of you have heard about the $12 million. Of course, you all have heard of it. Everyone talks about the $12 million in star bond revenues coming in. Only $9.4 million of it comes or is deposited into the general fund. The remaining, to get up to that $12 million, is dedicated for the dedicated sales tax fund at $1.8 million and $1.2 million for the special medical services fund. So on the top, the property tax, this line also includes personal property tax revenue. And you can see that it's up around the $68 million mark. In 2017, we're projecting that that revenue source will increase above the actuals in 2016 by 2%. But in 2017, our projection is for it to decline by 1%. And the reason for that is that even though residential and commercial properties their values have been improving over this past year, unfortunately, they're offset by declines in the personal property and the property owned by utility companies. As a result, coupled with the decline in our mill rate, which we are proposing to reduce by 2 mills, that the coupling of those 2 items results in a net 1% reduction in that property tax revenue. The yellow line is the sales tax line. And in 2017, it increased by 28%. That's because of the addition of the $9.4 million in star bonds. For 2017, we project that sales tax revenue will increase by 3.8%. And that's due to strong growth in our retail and business sector. The green line is the franchise taxes, which remained relatively flat over the years. But in 2017 and 18, we're projecting a 2.4% increase in the revenue collected because the BPU most recently adopted a rate increase on the electric consumption portion of their service charges. And that increase in the rate translates to additional revenue through our pilot program. The last item is the charges for services, which we have reflected as increasing in 17 and 18 by 1.2%. And that's because that modest increase is due to changes that have been made most recently in municipal court fine collection procedures. So thank you. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. At this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Doug Bach.
Thank you, Kathleen. Again, kind of taking a look back to where we were 20 years ago, and as we usually do, we take a look at where our mill rate is, our property tax rate. And this takes us down to a point, as I noted earlier, we're at 19% below where our combined mill rate was pre-consolidation. So this proposed mill rate puts us at a combined rate of 78.7%. You can also see where our revenues over these years have gone up significantly based on the assessed valuation that we have in the community. Back pre-recession, we'd really reached a high point. And then that dropped off, and then correspondingly, that's where we had to tweak our mill rate. A lot of those tweaks came on the county side of it because that budget is driven about 50% or more than that from property taxes alone. One thing to note, though, as we look back at pre-consolidation dates, I thought it was interesting to point out that, as many people would point out to us, we were #1 in Kansas City. Unfortunately, that was #1 being the highest in the mill rate of taxes at that time. Since that time, we've reduced our mill rate significantly, and we've moved down. So out of the 25 first-class cities in the state of Kansas, we're 13th overall. So right in the middle of the pack from where those first-class cities charge for their mill rate. In the county, we were 78th, with one being the higher mill rate. So it was on the lower end of where mill rates were across the state of Kansas. And in 2016, compared, and these data is all from 16 because that's how the state of Kansas, they put this information out from that standpoint, we were 95th at that point. So that comparable data on a $100,000 home, and that is taking just a constant $100,000 home, in 95, a resident would have paid $1,116. If it stayed at that $100,000 value, that shows where that reduction comes. They'd have paid $928. 2017, that number actually drops off to $905. Also, taking a look at where we are, we're about 47% of the tax dollar paid within Wyandotte County. 24 cents on the dollar goes to the city, 23 cents goes to the county. The balance of tax dollars paid in our community go to the state of Kansas or to the community college, the library, or the school district for which you reside in. All right, so now let's take a look at what's in our 2017-2018 budget, and that's kind of the exciting point of what's built into this. With that, I'm going to turn this over to my 3 assistant county administrators, and they're going to walk through these stages. So I'll start with Melissa Sieben. Melissa.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Commission. So I get to start out the slides of what we're doing in 17 and 18 now that we've covered all the data and statistics. So on the street side, which we know from the 2016 resident survey, there was a lot of interest in us putting more effort and energy, and I know as we prepared last year's budget, that was something the Commission was certainly looking at, and we want to continue that work. And on this slide, you'll see that the first 3 items, as we noted here, are actually items that are equipment that we want to bring in-house so our staff can do more work to keep the roads maintained and ultimately improve their condition and extend their life over the course of the years that a road would exist before it has to be completely reconstructed. So that's what those first 3 items are for. And the next item is a very critical component to business as we move forward, and that's an asset management system for our Public Works Department to be able to take in and actually catalog our assets, understand sort of their life expectancies, and then where we are best at making those maintenance moments with those different assets over time. So that's it's a big project, and it's an endeavor that is definitely needed here to help us better manage limited funds moving forward. The next items here are actually projects that we're going to be doing, construction projects. First one's actually a study in engineering for Upper Holiday Drive. For those that have been impacted by that being shut down, it's a very critical study that we need to conduct. And also bridge replacement along the same, in that same area on Holiday Drive. Lastly, there are 3 big road projects in here. There's Parallel, Leavenworth Road, which we've talked about quite a bit, and Hutton Road. And then for those who use the lake, we're looking at a 3-year phased replacement, or repair rather, of Wyandotte County Lake roads. And this meets 3 of our goals under the strategic plan. The next one, which we've talked a lot about, is our SOAR project. And this slide just shows that the basic concept for 18 is that we maintain what we started in 17. There's a limited amount of extra funds that are being put in here to maintain our mowing and property maintenance program, and that's on the last bullet. It's an additional $200,000. We've seen a marked difference, at least internally, from complaints from residents about our mowing program, because we have made a concerted effort with SOAR to change the operations there. We've also taken the demolition money out of our CDBG program and actually put it into the general fund in this proposed budget to allow for staff to be able to more rapidly respond to the needs of demolition in the community. The federal dollars make it much more complex and complicated to navigate, and then therefore drag out the time that those structures sit in the community. The other items are ones we've talked about in detail at other times related to tax sale, animal control, zoning, and codes. The next area, again, goes back to the resident survey in 16, and this is our sidewalks and trails infrastructure. There was a strong interest in trying to move forward in that area. Staff has looked at our sidewalk trails master plan that was conducted back in, I believe, 2011 or 14, I'm not quite sure which, but it identified a lot of sidewalk infrastructure that was still needed in the community. Staff would like to present to the commission this fall a gap program for sidewalks, kind of completing blocks, and then continuing our Safe Routes to Schools program, which has been a very big success in the community, as well as continue to work on replacing our curbs and sidewalks for the ADA compliance that is necessary for the unified government. Last items are all trail related. Fairfax engineering for the trail there that we'd like to put in the future. Continue partnership with Kansas City, Missouri through a MARC grant on the Kaw River Bridge, which is adjacent to the arena over in the Bottoms. And then lastly, looking at what future trail development would be next for the unified government and bringing priorities to that in 2018. In the area of transit, we've talked about this before too, about trying to figure out how to help people connect with jobs and get to necessary services. This budget does recommend replacement of 5 buses from aging and transit funds. It also incorporates the Amazon route, which we are funding starting the end of this month to get folks to work out at Amazon. And it proposes continuing that through 18 with the idea that if it's successful, we'll keep it going. If it's not being utilized like we anticipate it might, that we would then bring that back to the commission to consider changes or alterations to. We're also looking at the Fisher Park area. It's a transit connector turnaround area, and trying to figure out how to enhance that next to Fisher Park and with the changes that the BPU is making with its electric substation. So that's also a MARC grant. We're also obviously keeping the cost increases maintained for the ATA as they change annually as well, like our staffing changes change, theirs do too. And lastly, increasing Meals on Wheels, which is an important program for the community. My last slide, and my most expensive slide that I get to talk about tonight, is our water pollution control slide. We will see another proposed rate increase with this budget of 6%. That is down from 7% the last few years. We're also, on the back of this, submitting our proposal to the EPA on our consent decree, looking to do a sewer fee analysis, which hasn't been done in some time for the unified government, looking at classes of ratepayers and sort of who's paying, who should be paying, who's not paying at the level that's needed, and bringing that back to the commission as part of this 2018 budget. The big ticket item on here at $12 million for the 18 fiscal year is our Wyandotte sewer plant. That is located off of Walcott Drive and I-435. The engineering's underway and construction would commence next year. And the last item there that's sewer related is the replacement of Lombardi Drive sewer system. The last items on the slide are stormwater, and the big key here on this one is the master planning study, looking at prioritizing all those complaints, concerns that we know of out there, and looking to see how we can fund more of those projects in the future. Currently, our fee is $4, regardless of the type of property and the generation of water shed off that property. It's $4 no matter what. So we'll be looking at that. We also start work on some of our projects with the levees along the Kansas River, which we are going to be working in coordination with the Kaw Valley Drainage District and the City of Kansas City, Missouri on. And this provides us some money to start looking at some financial analysis on how we might be able to afford this very large $530 million project, of which we would be responsible as a collective at $130 million locally. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe Connor so he can tell you about exciting public safety initiatives.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We'll start off with talking about what's going to happen with police in 2017 and 18. And one of the big initiatives for 2018 is the purchase of the body and vehicle camera system. We've talked about that with you from a policy perspective at standing committees. We'll be coming back with more information on this system, but we're budgeting to actually get the system selected in 2018. In conjunction with that system, and because of the large amounts of data that are generated need to be transmitted quickly, we're actually building a fiber network to transmit that data. The one thing that I want to mention about the fiber network, though, is that this is being built as a multi-purpose network. And what I mean by that is we want to take advantage of those high speeds for our organization, for possible economic development purposes, and maybe even some community uses where appropriate. And so we think we're going to end up with a pretty robust private network at the end of the day, and we want to be able to take advantage of that. The proposed budget for police also includes 30 new vehicles, new 911 communication consoles, and an expanded summer work program to continue to expose young Wyandotte County residents to the benefits of a law enforcement career with the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. In fire, a new fire station is in the planning stages now and will be built in 2018. But one thing that we've added into the budget is a plan for the out years to continue to build and replace fire stations. The proposed budget also includes or continues to provide funding for renovation and repairs of existing stations, 2 new fire trucks, and 7 vehicles. The firefighter trainee program is also proposed to be maintained in the budget that's being submitted to you. Again, this program provides a path for Wyandotte County residents to become a firefighter EMT. In the area of the sheriff, as Doug mentioned, we're making a significant investment in a new juvenile center. And this center is being made or being constructed to improve the services that are provided to juveniles who are in custody and their families. The proposed budget also includes continuing the double bunking initiatives in the adult detention center. And of note, with the double bunking initiative, which has been going on for a number of years now, we've seen significant efficiencies in the Sheriff's Department operations. And one of the ways that we're taking advantage of those efficiencies is to use those savings to help fund the juvenile center. And this is a model we'd like to try to use with other departments, and a way to take that efficiency and actually gain something from that. The sheriff's been at this for a long time. He's been proposing double bunking as a way to save money. We're finally at that point, and so we really want to thank the sheriff for his dedication to this initiative. Also included are security upgrades at the courthouse and additional vehicles for the sheriff's department. In the area of innovation and technology, we've made a significant investment in this area, and the proposed budget maintains the commitment to realizing departmental efficiencies and improved customer service. This fall, our first app will be launched, providing mobile access to our 311 center. This will provide another method for our residents to communicate with us and is a major step to improving customer service. The integration of the Neighborhood Resource Center, 311, and Public Works systems will also provide improved customer service and communications by closing the information loop on requests that have been submitted. We'll also begin utilizing the cloud for storage and for some of our solutions, which will provide current efficiencies and help us with future spending to try to control future spending in those areas. Other initiatives include the launching of the new UG website, which will be tomorrow actually, increased GIS and mapping capabilities, and providing assistance to the district attorney to become more effective and efficient with his records archiving. So in the area of customer service, we just want to point out a few things that we think are will strictly or will really be geared toward our residents. And the first and foremost on that list is a citizen survey, which will be done in 2018. This is going to be a good indicator from our residents about any new priorities or priorities changing, and also to see if we've made any progress as an organization to meet our residents' needs. We've also formed a partnership with Pay It Mobile Services. Pay It is a local company that specializes in providing the public sector, with the ability to provide mobile online payments. Initially, we're going to focus on accepting payments through this application in the real estate section of the Treasury's office, but as the product matures, as we gain confidence, we're going to start to add more and more options for residents to utilize this application to provide payment to us. The parking systems in our pay lots, both the hardware and software, is proposed to be upgraded. There's just a growing level of frustration both among staff and customers because of the constant maintenance issues. These are systems that we touch literally daily, at least once, if not twice, because of their age and because of the status of the equipment. So we feel that the customer's experience will be enhanced if they can get in and out of our parking lots easily and quickly. We can start to take debit cards. We can start to make it a lot more convenient for people to do business here in the unified government. And we are proposing a new position, and this would be housed in the Economic Development Department. And the job description or the job title will be Small Business Liaison Outreach. Thank you. This is an opportunity to provide a point of contact for small business who want to relocate here, start a business here, or just have general inquiries about how to do business with the unified government. And again, we're trying to reach out and provide customer service in areas where we feel like we're lacking, and this would be a nice central point of contact for small business, and hopefully encourage more small business development for the city and for the county. I want to turn it over now to Gordon Criswell, and he's going to talk about facility enhancements.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner. I'm going to talk about facility enhancements. As you all know, we have over 60 buildings that our public and our citizens use to conduct businesses in our community. And we also realize that we have an ongoing issue with maintaining some of our facilities. They are in various stages of age and are needing a repair and upgrades. And so this budget contemplates at least our effort to continue focusing on facility enhancements, starting with the Justice Complex cooling tower. We have to replace that entire system in this proposed budget in 18. You all are fully aware of what happens in a big building when the air conditioning goes out. It's very uncomfortable for both our employees and our customers who come into that facility. We're finally completing the second half of the courthouse roof replacement. Hopefully Mr. DA will not be rained on in the future. And so this budget contemplates recommending replacement of the other half of the courthouse roof. We're really excited about this new fleet maintenance facility. You all authorized us to purchase a really nice, large commercial building on 54th and 54th and Kansas Avenue. This facility was almost walk-in ready for some of our heavier fleet vehicles. When we think about heavy fleet vehicles, a lot of times we think about fire apparatus. But we also have other departments that have large pieces of equipment, and this building will allow us to maintain those large pieces of apparatus and vehicles well into the future. We can protect them better. We can better predict the life of those assets and hopefully gain some efficiencies and save some money. Similar to what Melissa mentioned was the building asset and inventory management system. It's a new system that will allow us to do some of the same things around creating efficiencies with are many, many public buildings that we need to track when we repair them, how we repair them, if we repair them. And so this system will allow us to do that. I skipped over the Memorial Hall window and HVAC replacement. I don't know if you've been to Memorial Hall, but a couple of years ago we upgraded the second floor level and put in a wonderful elevator, and we now have what we believe to be a really good marketable event space now that that building is more accessible, and it just really stands out on that corner there on 7th Street. Lastly, you all a couple of weeks ago got a report on our parks master plan. That master plan had many, many, many recommendations with a big number behind them. This budget contemplates at least starting on the item that was the highest priority according to that plan, which was an upgrade of our park restroom facilities. We will need to come back to you all probably in the fall and have a deeper dive discussion about how do we implement the other pieces of that parks master plan and a funding source to accompany implementation of that parks master plan. Doug will have some other comments concerning facilities in another portion of the slide, but now I'll turn it back over to Doug. Doug?
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, a couple overall things within the budget. While we did see some increased sales tax last year, as we grew, a lot of operational costs have increased as well, so we had to go back and do a little bit of belt tightening to get where we are today. And this resulted in us cutting about $2.2 million out of the general fund areas of our budget. These are areas that tried not to focus on those which had the highest priorities given to the governing body. They are things we've been doing for a number of years. They are things that are, I will say, important to our operations, but we felt like we could do them at a reduced cost. Another big cost reduction is that in inmate farm-outs. That's a $700,000 reduction in our budget, and that's part of, as Joe mentioned, the prisoner double bunking scenario that we've gone to. This is saving money that allows us to put more than this to the bottom line. However, this is what we're reducing from the budget. We have more money that we're reducing, leaving within the Sheriff's Department budget until we can sustain a term and show that those costs are reduced, but that's the money that we're targeting then to move forward with for building the new juvenile facility. Employee compensation, I've built in 2% into the 2018 budget. Though, as represented, we have many of our friends here this evening that are out interested in what's going into the budget. We still have negotiations going on with 12 of our 13 labor unions, so we'll still need to talk through this, but this is what I've built into our program. 2% represents about $3.2 million across our organization when it comes to pay. Also from the employee base, we will be increasing our health fund, our health unified government share of our health fund by $3.8 million, or 14% increase in our health care costs for 2018. In 2018 too, we'll also be adding $1.2 million in our workers' comp fund. This is an area where we're seeing our overall numbers of work comp cases decrease, largely to our investment that we're going to from a work comp individual that works out of the Human Resources Office. This is helping us reduce the number of cases we have. However, unfortunately, last year we had some very tragic cases that came in, and those are ones that drive our overall cost up when you have a few cases that go really high. All right, it wouldn't be a budget presentation now without talking about STAR bonds and where we're at with that. Last year we put a lot of focus on this. This year I put a slide up here to indicate so everyone could see as we went through the budget that was just presented to you, where are those dollars going. Largest categories on top, and that's property tax relief. So when we're talking about 4 mills, that represents a little over $1 million per mill that comes back out of our budget, or $4.1 million that's going toward tax relief. As Kathleen noted, of the $12.4 million, about $3 million goes toward our special funds. So that goes toward the fire, EMS, So the EMS account gets a chunk of that money, and then the police and infrastructure through our dedicated sales tax will also get pieces of that money. So you see $2.2 million going into fire and EMS. Our SOAR initiative, or blight reduction, is getting $1.6 million from this money. Police and sheriff 1.4, and then the high priority of streets and neighborhood improvements is getting $1.3 million. And you can see the other categories and how we've distributed that through our budget. All right, well, we've tried to address and we keep working on a lot of the challenges that are out there for our government to deal with. We still have several things that are not really fully addressed within this budget. Top one on that chart is our public facilities. We have millions of dollars of improvements, and while we are now actually putting money toward those facilities and making some changes, which you heard from a new juvenile detention or juvenile center, changes to the courthouse, getting a roof project that we initially only did half of the roof to start with. Now we're finishing that, working on Memorial Hall. These are all legacy buildings, buildings that are going to be in our system for years to come, not forever. We have many more that we need to spend money on, so we have to keep programming them in. Fund balance, we've got the city fund balance up to just about 10%. It still needs a little bit of tweaking to move it up over the years. The county fund balance is only about half of where it needs to be. This budget puts it in at about 5%, which is a continuation. If we make continual savings in that area, we'll drop a little more to the bottom line, but that is one where we need to continue to build that up to get it above that 10% level. The levy system, which Melissa identified that we're doing study work on that, that's one we'll bring back and talk to the commission more about. It's a huge project to think about how we can raise the levee along the Kansas River and add to that. The federal government has put money toward this, but they're going to look to our city, Kansas City, Missouri, the railroads and such, that everybody needs to really invest in order to make this happen and to improve that levee for years and protect our community for years to come. Parks plan implementation, some money to it, but it's one where we need to sit down and look in the future and probably in the fall about where we're going to put money to really implement the things identified in this plan for the years coming forward. ADA compliance, we're working towards this when we do projects, when we do street projects, sidewalk projects, restrooms. We address this, we make it correct the way it should be for ADA compliance. However, to be more aggressive and go out and just specifically do ADA changes is one where we're falling a little bit short of where we'd like to be in order to meet the requirements we need to be doing across our community. And then I also like to keep our eye on that dedicated sales tax fund. This is a special fund that was approved by the voters in 2010. It's money that's divided out for the purpose of going toward neighborhood infrastructure, police, and fire protection in our community. It generates $10 million in our community. It's one we've actively used. As we hit the recession earlier, it really helped us through that time as it came online. It's one where we spend money to continue those operations. It's a 3/8 sales tax. It expires in 2020. So we need to look forward to that about educating our public in future years of how important this is to overall sustainability of our budget. As I close out, I'd just like to point out a community snapshot. We've seen a 4% increase in our population since 2010. 200 new home permits in 2017 to date. In the years 11 through 15, we didn't see 200 home permits through the through the full year of any of those years. Our employment's up 2.2% over the past year, which brings us to nearly 92,000 jobs. Wyandotte County ranks 67th out of the highest 344 largest U.S. county in terms of wages. It's always a difficult one we look at because the people who live in our community don't necessarily have all those jobs, and that's something we need to strive to continue to do to make sure that the ones in our community get those high jobs. But we are a very high employer in terms of wages. We're second in the state of Kansas. And our tax delinquency rate, which is something we're very proud to see go down from 7% to 5%. And that's largely to the efforts we've put toward going after being aggressive on tax delinquency collections and continuing to move forward with that with what we're doing in our SOAR efforts. As the mayor stated when we started this meeting, you all have had a lot of input and work on this as we move through the year. Go back to just a couple months after we finish the budget, we start working on the new one. Public Works Standing Committee sets down, they review all the projects we work through. That's a couple different meetings looking at what's coming on the coming year, what'll be the future years, and setting priorities as we start to build through that in the coming spring. In the fall, we had our strategic planning sessions. We moved forward, did a long-term financial forecast, and had our first public hearing in February of this year. In April, we had a strategic planning session that really talked about financing, and then you've gone back in and looked at the CMIP budgets again. So a lot of hours have already been spent by this governing body. That's helped me and my staff work on this as we put this together and build a budget that hopefully comes out in line with the priorities you have. And as we look forward to what workshops we'll be doing this month, we can stay focused on priority areas of what we might want to tweak within or adjust within the budget as we set it out today. As we close, Mayor, I'd like to give special thanks to my finance staff for putting this together. Kathleen Von Anchen, our Chief Financial Officer, and Debbie Johnson, our Deputy Finance Director, who have led this budget process. But also with them, I want to recognize the whole budget staff and ask them to come forward. Particularly Reginald Lindsay, our budget director, and Judd Knapp, Michael Peterson, Judy Herr. I know you have more people here. I don't know if we're going to call anybody else up, but for the 4th year in a row, they have received the Distinguished Budget Award, and I just want to call them out and recognize them for their achievement.
All right. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you for the outstanding budget work. We're used to it, but we need to remember that it's an honor for the work that you do, so thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Sharp. I'm not sure I'm more impressed with the award or to see Mike and Judd in suit and tie today.
We'd like that entered into the record, please.
With Mayor, that concludes our presentation for the proposed 2018 budget.
Thank you. I'm going to take some questions from the commission if they have any. I am going to recognize some elected officials who are here with us today. Want to recognize our district attorney, Mr. Dupree, is here. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Representative Tom Burrows is here with the state of Kansas, and Kansas City, Kansas Community College trustee J.D. Rios. We appreciate you all being here. And Doug has already recognized this. We have several of our union partners here today. We appreciate your coming out today. More than half of our, about 60% of our workforce is union, and we're proud to be a union town. We have 13 bargaining units, and we appreciate your partnership with the city as well and the service you provide for your members. So thank you all for being here also. All right, we have some opportunity for some questions. Mr. Walker.
I have a series of questions.
Can you use the microphone, please, sir?
Yes, sir.
Just pull it closer where we can hear your fine voice.
I think they can hear me fine without it.
I want everyone in TV land to hear you as well.
Doug, our total budget, is it a increase in dollars or a decrease in dollars? Total dollars compared to 217.
It's an increase.
How many dollars does it increase?
Our 2017 original budget was $345 million. This budget goes to $357.
So about 13, 14 million?
Yes.
All right. How much is a mill worth this year compared to what it was worth last year? Do you have that number?
It's about a $20,000 difference, we believe, in the total value of one. So
The budget you're proposing, did I see a slide that says you're proposing a roughly 2 mil
proposing a
reduction,
2 mil reduction on the city mill rate.
and the county holds constant?
Yes, sir.
Well, I want to go into this in more detail. How much did the district attorney's budget increase?
Can we do this today? We can certainly, I'd like to get all the questions on the table. We have our first budget workshop on Monday, and if we can get all the questions, I have about 12 from different commissioners of topics that you would like covered, but I want to make sure we get these answered correctly in a timely way. So if I would be glad for us to have an answer on Monday about the DA's budget, because I do think it's important that all these questions get
I haven't
answered.
finished my question. I thought
All right.
if he knew it right offhand.
I don't know the amount of the increase. We added a couple pieces of equipment to his budget, but I don't know operationally what the increase is unless.
So I want, yes?
There was a cut, the cuts we took, then we increased it by $60,000 in capital. Personnel.
I think we'd be better to present this at the workshop if you want exact numbers,
Well,
Mayor.
Thank you.
here's the point I'm trying to make. 13,000?
32.
Okay, the point I'm trying to make here is, and I've made this once before, I know there were some follow-up discussions under the previous district attorney. The district attorney's office is, to some extent, in my opinion, and has always been this way, not anything new, is the neglected stepchild of this whole public safety enthusiasm we have. Sitting at the pinnacle of what happens when public safety does its job is the district attorney's office. Now, in my lifetime, there's been there has been really one kind of philosophy. Hire them young, pay them cheap, keep them that way, and most of them will move on because at some point they cap out. Now, we've had this discussion, Doug, about, and this is my last crack at a budget, okay? I would like to see, I'd like for you to verify comparisons to other district attorneys' offices, and I'm distinguishing that from county attorneys because so many of our county attorneys are part-time, or it's a guy who it's his turn to be county attorney for a term, so he does it, then 2 years later somebody else that's a lawyer has to take his turn. Most of the prosecutors' offices develop a core of long-term hardcore prosecutors. They don't go. They're never going to get rich, but they're going to make a decent enough money with a pension and benefits that it's attractive as compared with going out and trying to hustle all those things on yourself. I'd like to be aware that you have had this discussion with this new district attorney. I know you had it with Mr. Gorman. I think you had it with Mr. Gorman, or maybe it was still Mr. Hayes at the time. And that something be shown, a plan be developed that actually makes progress towards that. There are people who will never stay in the district attorney's office because they believe they're going to go out and make a fortune in some other area of the law, and that's possible. But you need, and I don't know if the percentage is 20 or 30, you need people that know what they're doing when they get a murder case, that know what they're doing with a rape, with a kidnapping, with the violent crimes, and don't get outfoxed. And when you bring people in that are just out of law school, they get outfoxed. Maybe they get smart as they go along. But this issue is important to me if it is to nobody else. So I would like you to be able to address what progress we've made towards that objective and if we're going to try to make any progress in the future. It's part of the public safety team. It doesn't do any good to put cops out arresting people if we can't get them through the system and convict them. Okay? So I'm not going to take up the whole evening. I've got a lot of other questions, but I'll save them till Monday.
I do want to clarify one other thing. You're wanting additional pay for attorneys in the district attorney's office, and make sure that we did a salary study that included the district attorney's attorneys, and you want to make sure that there is competitive pay among the attorneys in the district attorney's office. Is that right?
Well,
I just want to clarify for the public, because
in a general kind of brief summary, I suppose that is it. I don't want everybody in the district attorney. Not everybody deserves a pay raise, because not everybody in any department is performing the way they should be. It should be up to the district attorney whether a person merits increases or does not. And there should be, if I'm a district attorney and I've got 5 or 6 years in and I'm looking at the future, I should see my path to a career in that office, or I should say, I'm going to cut my losses and get out of here and go find a job that'll pay me some real money. And I don't think we pay competitive. I know our district attorney makes less than any other district attorney in the state. He makes the established minimum, which is, or at least unless it's been increased, you have to pay a district attorney the same amount as a district court judge. You can pay him more. The Johnson County, Shawnee County, I can't say for sure about Douglas County, and Sedgwick County, I know, all make more money than a district court judge. And yeah, you can say Sedgwick is bigger, so they should. I doubt many have, comparatively, the level of crime. You get the gist of the whole thing.
I just wanted to make sure the public got the gist of what you're saying, because I've heard you make the statement before, and I just want to be clear. You're wanting competitive salaries in the district attorney's office.
I want a plan between Doug and the district attorney so that he can retain professional staff that are worthy of being retained, and the others, if they don't get pay raises, they move on down the road. But that should be the goal, to have a nucleus of lifelong prosecutors, do their whole career there.
All right, Commissioner Walters.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that maybe I could just ask for some preparation on between now and Monday. Following up a little bit on what Hal said, if we're having a revenue increase
Is your microphone on?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Now, a revenue increase of $13 or $14 million is what I was hearing, and that's a projection, which are often conservative, which seems to be quite a bit in excess of cost of living. So I guess I would like to have an understanding of why we would want to base our budget on a number that is so much higher than the cost of living, and why we wouldn't want to try to work towards something that's more in line with the cost of living so that we could have a more meaningful tax reduction. And along the line of tax reduction, if you combine the county and the city mill levy, or the portion of it, I know you said it was a 5% reduction to the city.
Right.
So combined it might be a 3% reduction or something like that. One of the things that we have been targeting as a commission is to reduce property taxes. So I guess I'd like to know, are we keeping score on that? Do we know how many residences are paying less in property tax now than they did last year, or projected to pay less for 2017 or for 2018? It would be nice to know if 20% of our residents are actually seeing a tax reduction, or is it 50%, or is it 70%? I happen to think it's less. So that's an information I think that we should keep track of, so that we can see if we're actually making progress. We are, at least as the county appraiser has said, in a period of inflation of home prices. So when someone has a 10% increase in their home price, a 5% reduction in their mill levy doesn't really offset the tax increase. And that's what our goal is tax reduction, not a lessening of a tax increase. So I'd like to know if we could find some information on that element of it. Thanks.
Yeah, we have tracked it for residential and commercial, and we can provide a showing of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll probably touch on a subject that's probably not as popular, talking about the fund balance. And I'm always curious as to our plan. There's always a tension in the discussion, as we often have in committee, about spending and how do we also increase and maintain our fund balance. I'm always curious and would like to have further continued discussion on that in terms of not only where we are, but just to inform our public on how important it is for us to maintain certain levels for our fund balance. I think it's important to make sure that the persons that are watching are aware of what that represents, why it's important, and where we are, and if we have, and I'd like to be able to talk about a cohesive plan for us to reach those desired levels over the course of some stated period of time that you and Kathleen would deem appropriate for us to get to the point where we need to be as we try to balance the tension in our budget about where we spend money. We tend to get caught up in spending, but we also need to make sure that we're taking a little bit aside to save as well. So I'd like to just continue to make sure that's part of our discussion.
Thank you. We'd welcome that discussion.
All right. Well, I want to again, Mr. Bach, thank you and your staff and the budget office, the finance team. You've done a great job again putting together a budget to begin the discussion. But Mr. Bach, I'll ask you to close us out tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had forgot to point out that the budget is online at our website, so if members of the public want to go online and see the budget, they can sign on to wicokck.org. They can pull it up, and it's right there. There's a link to it on our homepage, so you can get to it and go through all 500 plus pages of the document and dig into as much as they'd like to.
There's also on the website a link to the OpenGov site that shows 10-year trend lines in every department. So if you would like to, you can dig and sort in our budget. It's an open document. It's the public's document. And so it's out there and available for everyone to look at.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We are adjourned now, and we will be back down here at 7 o'clock.